And we conclude tonight with Daniel S. Levine, who is an award-winning business journalist and web editor of the Journal of Life Sciences, which is a new bi-monthly magazine that covers the intersection between life, sciences, business, policy, and society. That's what I want to talk about, the intersection among, which is a city. A city becomes that intersection. And it just happens that once again, San Francisco is at the center of another revolution.
It took it long enough, though. It gave birth to this revolution, but it's largely missed out on it until Mission Bay has kind of thrust it back in there.
Well, actually, Willie Brown was on the program, and I gave him credit, though he and I had been adversaries for some time. He got UCSF to go to Mission Bay, and I think we were talking about it. Without UCSF, there'd be no Mission Bay right now. It'd still be dirt.
I think that's without a doubt.
So you drive by 280, as I do, and I see these huge buildings. Not very attractive, by the way. Big, bulky buildings. In fact, it's starting to look like Parnassus Avenue, at least from that angle. I'm hoping, though, it will change. And I ask, I think, and I hope others ask, you know, what is going on here in San Francisco? How do we fit into the larger picture of this revolution, this new industry, biotechnology? It's yours.
Well, you know, UCSF, research at UCSF in the 70s gave birth to this industry. You know, the Herb Boyer with Stan Cohen down at Stanford, you know, basically developed the technology that gave rise to biotechnology, gene splicing, gave rise to Genentech. But all of this grew up around San Francisco, not within San Francisco. What UCSF opening its second campus down at Mission Bay has brought an enormous engine of research where you now have an entire ecosystem rising up around it, venture capital firms, independent research firms like Gladstone, independent biotech companies that are now moving in there because they want to be near that research. And
you're seeing real critical mass or just a few pioneers?
You're certainly seeing the start of it, but you know, I mean, take Cerna Therapeutics, which was one of the first companies to go in there. They've since been acquired by Merck, so that now puts a major pharmaceutical company right in the heart of Mission Bay.
Mm-hmm. How important was the stem cell initiative? Could the massive UCSF building a second campus, would that have been enough to continue the drive towards stem cell research and so on? Or do you think that bond passed by the California voters is having a significant effect also on what's happening in Mission Bay?
Well, I'm not sure you're going to necessarily see the spill-off from the CIRM in Mission Bay. I mean, ironically, UCSF's stem cell work is going on at the Parnassus campus, but it's certainly attracted other companies to California. It's attracted top-flight researchers who, you know, have had an uncertain future about what type of funding they'd be able to get elsewhere, who are now coming to California, coming to Northern California to do their work. So I think ultimately, as this technology is commercialized, you're going to see these companies rising up around here.
And San Francisco, what will be the role of San Francisco? We know many people cannot see what's happening in South San Francisco. You never see that unless you go over the hill and see the huge Genentech and Amgen, I think.
Well, Genentech and Amgen are sucking all the oxygen out of South San Francisco. You know, they're expanding so rapidly that, you know, there's not space for new companies to go in so much. And I think that's one of the opportunities for Mission Bay.
Do you think there's space at Mission Bay for those kinds of facilities, million-square-foot lab, office complexes?
Well, you know, what the type of facilities that you really need are the smaller ones where, you know, a 25-person company, a startup, an early-stage biotech can go in. And those types of spaces are hard to come by. And, you know, you've seen a company like Alexandria Real Estate Equities really, you know, stick its neck out and build that first building on spec. And you know, it's what brought in those initial companies. So,
and as I understand it, right now we do not have a lot of speculative laboratories. The vacancy rate's down to 6%, I think.
It's very expensive space to build
out
without having tenants. But what you are seeing in San Francisco, and outside of Mission Bay, is you're starting to see companies move into the downtown area where they're not putting their labs here, but they're putting headquarter facilities, companies that are either based in San Francisco, like Epiphany Biosciences, or you know, what I think you're seeing more of are companies that are maybe startups in Australia or New Zealand that really want to have access to the U.S. markets, want to have access to the financial markets here, to the regulators, who are coming in and setting up shop here, but maybe they're doing their research overseas.
I see. So when you go through the list of the Business Times list that we were talking about, of the top 50 companies in the Bay Area in biotechnology, there's not one from San Francisco. But what you're saying is the presence, there's smaller groups of individuals representing companies that just need a presence here that they can't be measured on a list of the top 50.
You know, I think
having tremendous impact.
In the traditional, if you can call it traditional, the original business model for biotechnology, San Francisco was just too expensive a place to be.
No one would ever imagine.
So it's, the industry grew up around it. The space wasn't here. I'm not sure the city was terribly welcoming. It's done things now under the Newsom administration that would, for instance, they've given a break on payroll taxes, which, helped encourage companies to move in. So, there's a different attitude in San Francisco now. And what you are seeing in San Francisco, you are seeing biotech companies, but they're much younger stage.
I see. So you have, and that I understand is also beginning to happen in the Web 2.0 industry, where they're growing their businesses here, but after about 100 employees, they keep the core group, like you were talking about, the leadership here that likes to be here, but they move the production, so to speak, to Canada or other parts of the country.
Well, in case of biotech, I think you may see that going to China, going to India, Singapore. I mean, it's a global industry from the word go.
I understood that a salary for a major chemist in India is somewhere between 60 and 120,000, but here it's 300 minimum, maybe 400,000 for a single chemist. We're not talking about lead chemists. That makes a lot of sense then.
Well, it does to an extent. I mean, you do have to deal with FDA issues, make sure that things are done, up to standards that they have to meet in the U.S. But I do think there is a growing trend where you're going to see people not necessarily move all the operations offshore, but maybe they'll do a clinical trials, maybe they'll contract out early stage research to a company in China.
You have this journal you're doing, the Journal of Life Sciences. This is brand new.
It launched in May.
And tell me about it.
Sure. It is trying to fill a void by writing about life sciences at the intersection of business, society, and policy. We like to think of as kind of an economist or foreign affairs for the life science industry.
And tell me about this, some of the articles that are in here.
Sure.
As examples.
It runs the gamut. It's things such as looking at some of the problems the pharmaceutical industry is having with its images, looking at, there's an article there about patenting life and some of the, whether such patents encourage innovation or stymie innovation. It's also some stories that are more focused on individual technologies.
Where do you want to take this magazine? You expect it to become, hopefully, a centerpiece for just the kinds of individuals we were talking about who are now in San Francisco and in the Bay Area, and I'm sure around the country. But who's your audience? Who are you trying to reach?
We're, the audience for this is certainly C-level executives within the industry, but we think it speaks to a much larger audience as well. Certainly, policymakers that are dealing with issues of healthcare, with drug policy, who really don't understand what biotechnology is and the impact it's having on every part of our society. And we talk about it a lot from a therapeutic point of view, but certainly I'm sure you've heard a lot about biofuels and
yes.
the current situation with energy and how biotechnology is really seen as something that could solve that problem.
What the venture capital world is certainly moving into it. I mean, I think it's reached now $800 million last year. What percent of the biotechnology industries in the Bay Area are in alternative fuels? What percent might be in new drugs?
Well, I would say the biotechnology industry in the Bay Area is overwhelmingly focused on therapeutics. It's been expanding into diagnostic area somewhat, but what you do have here are some very significant efforts, most notably the one between the University of California and British Petroleum, BP, which was a $500 million joint research.
Is that going to be done in Berkeley?
Yeah, that'll be centered in Berkeley.
And this, of course, is to develop alternative fuels.
That's correct.
$500 million grant, which brings up the whole question of money. I want to close with this concern I have. What drives these industries? I would imagine when it comes to UCSF, the state budget is a flow of money to keep the doors open. You have grants. You have federal money from the NIH. Are they dependent, or will they be dependent upon the cycles of fiscal integrity of the country, taxes, I mean, and deficits? Or can they operate now without being dependent upon tax revenues?
Well, there's no doubt that type of funding is critical for early stage research, because you're not going to get investors to step up to the plate to do something as speculative as basic research that may not pay off for 10, 20 years into a product. But at the same time, it takes massive amounts of money to take that basic research and do what's known as translational work, to turn that research into a product that you or I can use that actually cures a disease. And that's money that has to come from the capital markets.
The capital markets?
Absolutely.
Not the government grants or...
No, the government grants, primarily fund basic research.
So you're saying this translational area, which I guess Gladstone, which is down in Mission Bay, a remarkable man that I can't remember his name. I think it's Mahi or something like that. What a background,
yeah,
as a doctor, as a PhD. He's dedicated himself to this translating of research.
Well, he's dedicated himself along with a grant from Merck and a partnership with Merck.
Okay.
Which is where the money for that is coming from.
But that's good. I mean, my concern was that how much is the biotech industry going to be an addict to fiscal funding versus the private sector or venture capital? What percent do you think of the industry we're seeing right now, or the research we're seeing right now, especially in stem cell research and other really innovative areas, is privately funded, and how much of it is government funded?
Well, ballpark, NIH probably put up about $25 million for research last year. That compares to about 55 billion versus 25 billion. But 55 billion from the pharmaceutical and biotech sector.
Well, then that's very positive. It means this industry can't survive without necessarily a government handout if the government went bankrupt.
Well, it can, but again, they're funding different parts of that life cycle of product development.
Well, look, we are glad that you've started this journal. We're glad that you were with us. We wish you a lot of luck here. We need this kind of journal and the web version of it as well. Which,
if I can plug, is
yes,
tjols.com. thejournaloflifesciences.com.
Okay, and I will have a link at our website.
Great. Appreciate it very much.
Daniel, thank you very much for being
here.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Visit our website at www.sfunscripted.com.